The courtroom went silent when my ex-husband's attorney finally read page 12. I watched the color drain from Jason's face as reality hit him like a freight train. His hands started trembling. Those divorce papers he'd been so eager to sign suddenly felt like dead weight in his lap. And me? For the first time in 2 years, I allowed myself a genuine smile. But let me back up. You need to understand how a woman everyone pitted for being walked over actually orchestrated the most calculated chess game of her life. My name is Michelle Chun. I'm 38 years old, and 3 months ago, my marriage to Jason Reynolds officially ended. 18 years together. That's longer than most tech startups survive, longer than some smartphones stay relevant, and definitely longer than my optimism should have lasted. But I'm a patient woman. I get it from my mother. I met Jason when I was 19, working nights at my uncle's restaurant while taking community college courses during the day. I wasn't aiming for Harvard, just trying to build something stable. Jason was 18, working as a server, handsome, ambitious, and absolutely certain he was destined for bigger things. I was 20 when we got married. Emma arrived when I was 21. I kept working double shifts, building up savings, squirreling away every extra dollar. My mother always told me, a woman should have her own foundation. Not hidden money, just her own security. By 25, I'd saved enough to start a consulting business. Small at first, helping local companies with their digital marketing. Jason wanted in immediately. We're partners, he said. Let me handle the client relationships while you do the technical work. So I did. He became the face of Chun Digital Solutions while I built everything behind the scenes. For 13 years, I coded, strategized, created campaigns, and pulled all-nighters to meet deadlines. Jason hosted client dinners, attended networking events, and collected the praise. My official title? Founder and technical director. My actual role? The invisible engine keeping everything running. At industry conferences, I was Jason's tech wife. At award ceremonies, he thanked his vision, his drive, his leadership. Somehow my name never quite made it into his acceptance speeches. Around year 15, things shifted. He started making major decisions without consulting me. Started working late more frequently. Started criticizing everything, my clothes, my social skills, my lack of executive presence. Executive presence. I was running the technical operations of a 7-figure business. But apparently, I lacked presence. Then 2 months ago, he came home on a Wednesday afternoon. I was testing a new campaign algorithm. One of mine, of course, because Jason couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. He sat down at our kitchen island with this expression. Not sad. Not apologetic. Just done. I want a divorce, he said. And I want the business, the house, the investment accounts, everything. You can have Emma. Like our 17-year-old daughter was a piece of furniture he was generously leaving behind. Keep Emma, he said, as if our daughter was a subscription service he was canceling. I just stared at him. 18 years, and this was the ending? At our kitchen island, between the coffee maker and the fruit bowl? What I didn't know then was that Jason had been planning this exit for over a year. He already had an attorney, Harold Price, expensive and ruthless. He'd been building his case while I was optimizing our SEO strategies. The next day, his father appeared. Patrick Reynolds, a man who treated me like the help for nearly 2 decades despite the fact that I built the business that funded his luxury cruises. He patted my shoulder with practiced sympathy. You should have been more assertive, Michelle. Jason needs a strong partner. Patrick's marriage advice was always fascinating considering his own wife spent 6 months a year traveling for business, specifically to avoid being home with him. That first week was chaos. Jason moved me to the guest room. He had papers drawn up, assets listed, timelines established. Everything moved at lightning speed, and I felt like I was being swept away. Everyone saw a woman whose husband had outgrown her. A technical person being left behind by her more dynamic partner. A victim who never saw it coming. But here's what nobody knew. 2 years ago, I found something. Something buried deep in our business accounting that Jason thought was hidden forever. And I'd been quietly preparing ever since. Within a week, Jason took complete control. The guest room became permanent. My closet shrank from a walk-in to 2 drawers he graciously let me use. Within 2 weeks, he started bringing her around. Diana Mason, 32 years old. Worked at our company as a brand strategist, which apparently meant creating PowerPoint slides and looking good in designer dresses. She walked into my kitchen like she owned it, drank from my coffee mugs, sat on my couch, made herself comfortable in my life. Jason paraded her everywhere. Dinners at the restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries. Posts on LinkedIn about surrounding yourself with excellence. He meant her, not me, in case that wasn't clear. The humiliation was methodical. First, he cancelled my credit cards. We need to separate finances, he said, like it was reasonable. Then he suggested I find somewhere else to stay while we work things out. My own home. And I was being asked to leave. Patrick came over to help me pack. By help, he meant supervise while Jason sorted through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes? Fine. Family photos? Some. My mother's jewelry collection? Those were marital assets, Patrick explained. Jason was entitled. They packed my things in cardboard boxes. Not even good boxes. Warped moving boxes from the liquor store. Through all of this, I had one person I thought I could trust. Rachel Torres. We'd been friends since college. 20 years of friendship through startups and failures and everything in between. She was so supportive. Always checking in. Always asking how I was handling things. Always ready to listen. But something felt wrong. Jason seemed to know my plans before I finalized them. When I mentioned to Rachel I was thinking of fighting for the house, Emma came home saying, "Dad told me it won't work." When I told Rachel I was looking at apartments downtown, Jason made a comment about that exact neighborhood being above my budget now. Then I understood. Rachel had always admired Jason. The way she lit up when he entered a room. The way she complimented his business acumen just a little too enthusiastically. The way she asked about him first whenever we talked. Jason had been using her admiration for years. Making her feel important. Special. Different from other women. Probably hinting at possibilities after the divorce. My best friend was his spy. 20 years of friendship, traded for some attention and false promises. But the worst part wasn't Jason. Wasn't Patrick. Wasn't even Rachel. The worst part was Emma. My daughter watched everything. The girlfriend moving in. The grandfather packing my boxes. The way her father looked at me like I was worthless. And Jason was working on her. Dripping poison every single day. Your mom is being difficult. I just want everyone to move forward. She's the one making this complicated. I'm trying to be fair, but she won't cooperate. Emma started pulling away. Not angry exactly, just confused, distant. She didn't know who to believe. And her father was very convincing. I could lose the business. Could lose the house. Could lose everything I'd spent 18 years building. But watching my daughter look at me like maybe I was the problem? That was the real wound. I hired an attorney. David Park. 48 years old, reputation for being thorough and absolutely zero tolerance for games. He reviewed everything and laid it out plainly. You built this business. You're entitled to half of everything. The house, the company, the accounts. We fight hard. I sat there for a long moment. What if I don't want to fight? David stared at me like I'd suggested we send Jason a thank you basket and a Starbucks gift card. He thought I was broken. Defeated. Too beaten down to stand up for myself. He had no idea. I moved into a modest townhouse with Emma. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen half the size of our old pantry. Half our belongings didn't fit. They sat stacked against the walls like monuments to how far we'd fallen. Meanwhile, Jason posted photos with Diana. New chapter, new energy. Grateful, he wrote. Patrick commented, "You deserve this happiness, son." My sister called, furious. You need a shark attorney. Destroy him. Everyone had advice. Everyone knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who'd given up. Everyone was wrong. Here's the thing about being underestimated. People stop watching you carefully. They stop protecting their vulnerabilities. And that's exactly when you learn everything you need to know. 2 years. That's how long I'd been carrying this knowledge. That's how long I'd known the truth about Jason Reynolds and his successful, thriving, completely hollow business. It started on a Thursday night 2 years before the divorce. Jason was at a networking event. He was always at networking events by then, though I didn't yet know what that really meant. I was reviewing quarterly finances, reconciling accounts, doing the unglamorous work that kept the business operational. And I found something odd. A payment to a vendor I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a pattern. Money flowing out of business accounts into places I'd never authorized. I stayed up until 4 in the morning following the trail. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Jason had been taking loans against everything we owned. The house? Our beautiful house everyone admired? First mortgage, $320,000. Second mortgage, $280,000 taken 3 years ago. Third mortgage, $290,000 taken 18 months ago. Total owed, $890,000. Actual value, $700,000. We were underwater by $190,000 on a property I thought we owned. The business was worse. Credit lines maxed, $175,000. Outstanding vendor payments, $95,000. Tax liens, $68,000. Equipment financing, $62,000. The company Jason bragged about at every conference? The company that was supposedly thriving? It was drowning in $400,000 of debt. Even the cars were leased with balloon payments coming due soon. We owned nothing. We just had very expensive monthly obligations. I sat in my home office at 4 in the morning, surrounded by printouts, and did the math. Total debt, approximately $1.7 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.4 million. We were $300,000 in the hole. Possibly more. Where had it all gone? Over the following weeks, I traced every transaction. The picture that emerged was devastating. Real estate investments that failed, $150,000. Personal spending on luxury goods and travel, $95,000. An apartment I didn't know about, rented for Diana, $48,000. Lifestyle expenses that never benefited our family, another $70,000. My husband wasn't building a business empire. He was building a house of cards. With borrowed cards. That were also on fire. We looked successful the same way a movie set looks real. Convincing from a distance. Completely fake up close. My first instinct was confrontation. To demand answers. To scream. But I knew Jason. I'd watched him manipulate clients, partners, employees for years. If I confronted him, he'd gaslight me. Make me feel crazy. Blame me for not understanding business strategy. And worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to access my separate assets. Because I'd always kept something of my own. My mother's voice in my head, a woman should have her own foundation. My retirement account from before the marriage. I'd rolled it over but never touched it. By then, it had grown to $195,000. And my mother's estate. She'd passed when I was 30, leaving me $285,000. Her will was crystal clear. This inheritance is for Michelle alone. I'd kept it separate for 8 years. Never mixed it with business funds. Never used it for household expenses. My mother kept her own account for 40 years. Not secret money, she always said. Just mine. Smartest woman I ever knew. I had roughly $480,000 that was completely, legally, separately mine. I didn't confront Jason. Instead, I protected myself. I worked with my cousin, a financial advisor, to create an irrevocable trust for Emma. My retirement and inheritance went into that trust. My name wasn't on it as beneficiary. Jason's certainly wasn't. It was for Emma's future, college, graduate school, first home, emergencies. And it was untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every loan document. Every hidden account. Every suspicious transaction. Copies at my sister's house. Copies in a safety deposit box. Everything saved on encrypted drives. And then I waited. I knew Jason would leave eventually. People like him always do. They get bored. They find someone younger. They decide they deserve more. I just had to be ready when it happened. 2 years of waiting. 2 years of watching him dig deeper. 2 years of smiling at conferences while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. When Jason finally asked for the divorce, when he demanded the house, the cars, the business, everything, I almost laughed. He wasn't asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from David Park and placed 2 thick folders on his desk. 2 years of evidence. Every loan document. Every statement. Every hidden liability. He read in silence for nearly an hour. When he finally looked up, his expression had completely changed. "You've known about this for 2 years?" I was waiting for him to leave. I knew he would eventually. And when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt. He just doesn't realize it yet. David leaned back. The pity was gone from his eyes. What replaced it was something like respect. "So when you sign over the assets, I walk away clean. He gets the mortgages, the business debts, the lease obligations. All of it becomes his sole responsibility. And your inheritance, your retirement. Separate property. Never commingled. Legally protected. Sitting safely in a trust for Emma." David was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. "Mrs. Chun," he said, "I believe I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up." I smiled back. Everyone thinks that. That's the point. The next 2 months were theater. I became exactly what everyone expected. Broken, defeated, barely holding together. I showed up to mediation with dark circles and shaking hands. I spoke quietly, uncertainly, like a woman who'd lost all confidence. I asked for almost nothing. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our second mediation session. "I'm not trying to be vindictive. I know the business is his vision. I know the house means everything to him. I don't want to destroy our family more than it already is." I requested $40,000 cash. My personal belongings. Shared custody of Emma. That was it. Jason agreed immediately. He was probably expecting me to fight for half. That's what any competent lawyer would demand. Instead, I was asking for scraps. He looked at me across that table with something almost like pity. Like I was a wounded animal he was mercifully putting down. I deserved an Emmy for that performance. With each passing week, Jason's confidence grew. He stopped being careful. Stopped pretending to be reasonable. He started telling everyone I hadn't even fought. "She just gave up," he told his business contacts. "I offered her a fair settlement, and she took it without question." Patrick was worse. He bragged everywhere. "Jason is keeping everything. That woman didn't get a penny. I always knew she wasn't strong enough for my son." To celebrate his upcoming victory, Jason bought himself a new car. $65,000. Financed through the business, of course. He was still using company money for personal expenses. Still digging that hole deeper. He also took Diana to Michelin-starred restaurants. Posted photos constantly. "Life is extraordinary with the right person," he wrote. The right person. He meant the person who didn't know about the debt yet. Meanwhile, Diana had started redecorating my house. New furniture. New artwork. She even repainted my home office. Navy blue. I'd spent weeks choosing that warm gray. Weeks of samples and lighting tests. And she painted over it with navy blue. Navy blue. Like her future with Jason once she discovered he was broke. Rachel kept calling, fishing for information. I played along perfectly. "How are you managing?" She'd ask with fake concern. "I just want it over," I'd tell her, making my voice sound tired. I don't have the energy to fight anymore. Within hours, Jason would know. I could practically watch him relax, lowering his guard even further. But while the adults played games, Emma was watching. And my daughter, my smart, observant, wonderful daughter, was starting to notice inconsistencies. She noticed her dad's new $65,000 car, but heard Jason say they couldn't afford to upgrade Emma's laptop for college applications. She noticed Diana's shopping bags, but heard Jason complain about cash flow issues. She noticed the disconnect. One evening, Emma came to my townhouse and sat at my small kitchen table. "Mom," she said quietly, "is Dad actually successful?" I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "What do you think?" She was quiet, processing. "I think something's wrong. I think he's pretending." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "Trust me. Just wait a little longer." My 17-year-old figured it out before 2 attorneys and an accountant did. Behind the scenes, David was preparing our legal strategy with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement clearly stated I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Jason. In exchange, I would receive my modest settlement and walk away. But attached to that agreement was an addendum. A detailed liability disclosure statement. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan, every obligation tied to those assets. When Jason signed for all assets, he would be legally assuming all liabilities. The mortgages would become his sole responsibility. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations would be his problem alone. It was all there. Legal. Proper. Devastating. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Harold Price called David with concerns. "My client is assuming significant assets," Harold said carefully. "I'd like to request a full financial audit before we finalize." David kept his voice neutral. "Of course. We'll provide whatever documentation you need." But when Harold brought this to Jason, my soon-to-be ex-husband shut it down immediately. "No audits," Jason told him. "I built that company. I know exactly what it's worth. I'm not paying some forensic accountant to tell me what I already know." Harold pushed back. "I strongly recommend we verify asset values before you sign. This is significant." "No." Jason cut him off. "Diana wants this done. I want this done. No more delays." Harold had been practicing law for 25 years. He knew when a client was about to make a terrible mistake. He also knew he couldn't force someone to take his advice. He presented Jason with a waiver acknowledging that Harold had recommended an independent financial review and that Jason was declining against counsel's advice. Jason signed it without reading it. Just like he'd sign everything else without reading it. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend to make someone skip the fine print. The night before the hearing, Jason sent me a text. "Thank you for not being difficult about this." I stared at that message for a long time. 18 years of marriage. 18 years of building his business, raising his daughter, supporting his dreams. And he was thanking me for not being difficult while he threw me away. I typed back, "I just want what's best for Emma." What was best for Emma? Her trust fund, her future secured, and a father who was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. David called me that evening. Monday, 10 a.m. final hearing. Judge Richard Martinez. "Are you ready?" I looked around my modest townhouse. The simple furniture. The boxes finally unpacked. The small kitchen I'd painted warm gray because it reminded me of peace. I've been ready for 2 years. Monday, May 8th. 10 a.m. courtroom 6A. I remember every detail. The fluorescent lights. The smell of old books and floor wax. The quiet shuffling of papers. This was where 18 years of marriage would officially end. And where 2 years of patience would finally pay off. Jason arrived first. Charcoal designer suit. Hair perfect. His new watch catching the light. He looked confident. Relaxed. Like a man about to close the deal of his life. Diana was in the gallery. Not allowed in the proceedings, but there for support. I saw her through the door, checking her phone, looking bored. Patrick was there too. Best suit. Smug smile. Probably planning a celebratory lunch. I arrived a few minutes after Jason. Simple gray suit. Minimal makeup. I looked tired. Defeated. Like a woman with nothing left to lose. Perfect. Judge Richard Martinez entered. Everyone rose. Early 60s. Steel gray hair. Reading glasses. 28 years on the family court bench. He'd seen every manipulation tactic that existed. He reviewed the file briefly. Looked up. Reynolds versus Chun. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Harold stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client Jason Reynolds is assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the business known as Chin Digital Solutions, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Chun receives a cash settlement of $40,000. David rose beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to these assets and accepts the proposed settlement terms. Judge Martinez's eyes moved to me. He studied my face, looking for signs of coercion. Mrs. Chun, he said, I need to confirm you understand what you're agreeing to today. You're giving up your claim to substantial property. The family home. The business you helped build. Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft. Slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And you're entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you. No, Your Honor. I looked down, then back up. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want this to be over. The judge studied me for another moment. I could see him debating internally. Whether to push harder. Whether to order a continuance. Whether to protect me from what looked like a terrible decision. But I was represented by counsel. I was answering clearly. I was an adult making my own choice. Very well, he said finally. Let's proceed. The clerk distributed the final documents. Page after page. Signatures required throughout. Jason signed eagerly, barely glancing at what he was agreeing to. I signed slowly, deliberately. Every stroke of my pen was careful and precise. This was the moment I'd been waiting 2 years for. Across the courtroom, Jason glanced at Patrick and smiled. Patrick nodded approvingly. Diana's phone buzzed. Probably congratulating him. Meanwhile, Harold Price was doing what good lawyers do. Reviewing the complete package one final time. Main agreement signed. Asset schedule signed. Settlement terms signed. Then he reached the addendum. Liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read. Watched the confusion flicker across his features. Watched him flip back, then forward, like he was hoping he'd misread. He hadn't. Harold's face went pale. He leaned toward Jason, trying to be discreet. Jason, he whispered. We need to talk. Jason waved him off, basking in his victory. Not now. We're almost done. Jason. Harold's voice was urgent. You're assuming all debt. Jason turned to look at him. What? The liability disclosure. The mortgages, the business liens. It's all here. You're assuming personal liability for everything. For the first time, Jason actually looked at what he'd signed. I watched his eyes scan the numbers. Watched the color drain from his face. House, $890,000 owed. Market value, $700,000. Business, $400,000 in combined debts. Vehicles, $95,000 in lease obligations. Additional liabilities, $180,000. Total debt, approximately $1.7 million. Net value of everything he just claimed, negative $300,000. He hadn't won the prize. He'd won the bill for it. Jason stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. This isn't right. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers. She hid this from me. This is fraud. Judge Martinez's voice was sharp. Mr. Reynolds, sit down. These numbers are fake, Jason insisted, his voice rising. She manipulated the documents. Mr. Reynolds. The judge's tone left no room for argument. Sit down. He sat, but his hands were shaking. His confident smile was gone. Judge Martinez looked at the documents in front of him, then at Jason. Mr. Reynolds, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with assets you are claiming. Assets in your name. Your business. Your property. He fixed him with a hard stare. Are you telling this court you don't know your own financial situation? Silence. Harold cleared his throat. Your Honor, I should note that I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing. He declined. I have documentation. He produced the waiver. The one Jason had signed without reading. Judge Martinez reviewed it briefly. So Mr. Reynolds was advised to verify these figures. He chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. He looked at Jason. Is that correct? Jason was staring at the waiver like it was a snake. I didn't. I thought. Is that your signature, Mr. Reynolds? A long pause. Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily. You had the opportunity to investigate. You chose not to. The agreement stands. Jason turned to me, desperation breaking through. You knew. His voice cracked. You knew about all of this. I met his eyes calmly. I was your technical director for 13 years, Jason. I knew about everything. His face cycled through emotions. Confusion, rage, betrayal, fear, and finally, realization. I want to withdraw the agreement, Jason said, turning back to the judge. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. Judge Martinez shook his head. Mr. Reynolds, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by competent counsel. You declined additional review. Your wife did not hide anything. These are your debts. Your mortgages. Your obligations. He paused. The agreement is final. The gavel came down. Mrs. Chun, you have your settlement. Mr. Reynolds, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. I stood, smoothed my jacket, picked up my purse. Then I looked at Jason one last time. He was slumped in his chair. Papers scattered. His whole world collapsing. You said you wanted everything except Emma, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of that courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I could hear Jason's voice rising, yelling at Harold, demanding to know how this happened, threatening lawsuits. Harold's calm response, I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass doors, I saw Diana's face change as she listened. Saw her look at Jason, really look at him, and see something other than the successful businessman she thought she was getting. She was gone before I reached the elevator. Moving fast. Not looking back. I stepped outside into the May sunshine. The sky was blue. The air was warm. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was a new life. Smaller. Simpler. But completely mine. The collapse happened fast. Within 2 weeks, Diana had moved out. Packed her things overnight. Left a note, this isn't what I signed up for. The navy blue office sat empty. Within a month, Jason tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers. Just banks calling about missed payments. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting. Clients left. Vendors sued. The company Jason had spent 18 years building was crumbling. Within 3 months, Jason was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who'd bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer, almost nothing. Patrick's perfect son was calling family members for loans. showing up with excuses. Michelle must have hidden the debt somehow. I was tricked. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The failed investments, the secret apartment, the luxury spending, all his choices. All his signatures. Rachel called me about a week after the hearing. Her voice was shaking. I had no idea it was this bad. I'm so sorry, Michelle. I never meant. I thought Jason and I didn't answer. Didn't respond. Didn't give her closure. Some friendships don't deserve second chances. 20 years of history, betrayed for some attention and empty promises. She tried calling 3 more times. Then stopped. I imagine she's still waiting for Jason to notice her. Patrick tried going through Emma. Tell your mother I didn't know about the money problems. Tell her I'm sorry for how I treated her. Tell her I want to apologize. Emma looked at her grandfather, the man who'd packed her mother's belongings in liquor store boxes, and said, Mom's busy building her life. She doesn't have time for excuses. Emma, my brilliant daughter. She finally understood everything. Not because I explained it, but because she figured it out herself. One evening, about a month after the divorce, she sat with me in my townhouse. The one with the warm gray kitchen. The one with the simple furniture and the finally unpacked boxes. You waited 2 years, she said quietly. You knew this whole time and you just waited. I wanted to make sure you were protected, I told her. Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay. The trust fund. $480,000. Safe and untouchable. She was quiet. Then she hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind of hug I hadn't gotten from my 17-year-old in months. The kind that said, I understand. I'm proud of you. My $40,000 settlement went toward getting established. First month's rent. Security deposit. Reliable furniture. It wasn't luxury. But it was stability. The trust fund stayed exactly where it was. Emma's future. College. Graduate school. A safety net nobody could take. And me? I enrolled in software development courses. Updated my skills. Started freelancing. The work I'd put on hold to help Jason build his empire. I was finally building my own. My first real client was a small nonprofit. They needed a complete digital overhaul. How do you start from nothing? The director asked me. I thought about it. 1 line of code at a time. 1 problem at a time. 1 day at a time. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Jason showed up at my townhouse. I barely recognized him. Weight loss. Dark circles. Hair not quite perfect. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like someone who'd been through a war and lost. He stood in my doorway, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I didn't know it was this bad, he said. His voice was hollow. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I leaned against my doorframe and looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved for half my life. This man who'd thrown me away like garbage. This man who was now drowning in consequences of his own choices. Can we talk? He asked. Maybe we can figure something out. I could. I don't know. Maybe we could. He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't bring himself to ask for what he actually wanted. Help. My help. After everything. You asked for everything except Emma, I said calmly. You got exactly what you wanted. Michelle, please. Goodbye, Jason. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while making dinner. That evening, after Emma went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my mother's photo on the shelf. You were right about everything, Mom, I said quietly. Keep your own foundation. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small. The townhouse was quiet. Small. Nothing like the house I'd lived in for 18 years. But it was mine. Every paint color. Every piece of furniture. Every decision. Mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, you'll love what's coming next. More gripping tales of patience, strategy, and justice are waiting for you. Don't miss out on the satisfaction. See you in the next one. Subscribe and comment where you are watching from.